I'm Ellie Tran, 27, a registered nurse and eldest daughter of the Tran family. The velvet banner over the entrance read, Happy Sweet 16. Ivy in glittering gold cursive. It fluttered slightly in the breeze as I stood at the edge of the driveway, holding the wrapped gift I'd spent 2 extra night shifts to afford. Pink spotlights lit up the front yard like a fairy tale stage, and guests swirled through the open gate in dresses that sparkled and suits that shimmered. A string quartet played a soft version of Taylor Swift's Enchanted somewhere in the backyard. The valet didn't ask for my name. He just glanced at my beat-up Corolla and waved me toward the guest parking down the street. I walked the gravel alone, high heels sinking slightly into the soft ground, clutching my thin coat tighter around my arms. A group of teens snickered as they passed me. Ivy's friends. Probably they didn't recognize me. Inside, the house was transformed. Hanging chandeliers had been brought in just for tonight. Towering arrangements of pale orchids lined the hallway, and a rotating ice sculpture in the shape of a swan dripped slowly into a gold basin. I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. Lipstick faded, a loose strand of hair curling against my cheek, and quickly looked away. Near the pool, Ivy stood beneath a flower arch, surrounded by photographers, friends, and Dad. He looked weaker than the last time I saw him at the hospital, but there he was in a suit, raising a champagne glass. My stomach turned. Ellie. A sharp voice. Aunt Diane. I turned, forcing a smile. Hi, Auntie. She frowned. I didn't think you were coming. Ivy's big day, you wouldn't want to make it about you. I just wanted to give her this, I said, lifting the carefully wrapped box, a book of poetry she liked. Hand-bound. She looked past me. Well, you can put it on the gift table, but don't linger. Ivy's in the middle of her presentation. Presentation. Then the music stopped. A hush rolled through the yard like a ripple. All heads turned toward the long driveway. A pair of headlights approached, slow and deliberate. Then the car emerged, a silver Audi convertible, with a giant red bow on top. Gasps and cheers exploded from the crowd. Ivy squealed and threw her hands over her mouth. Dad laughed, gripping her shoulder as if he hadn't just been discharged from the cardiac ward. Happy birthday, baby girl, someone shouted. I stood still. No one looked at me. No one asked where I'd been when Dad coded in the ICU. No one asked who had paid the copay on his uninsured medications, who had cleaned up after his stroke, who had readjusted his pillows at 3 a.m. It wasn't Ivy. I stepped back, bumped into the ice swan. A drop landed on my bare arm, freezing and slow. A staff member brushed past me, holding a tray of macarons. Sorry, she said flatly. Not looking. I didn't say a word. And then, Miss Ellie. It came from behind me, a man's voice, authoritative but kind. I turned. A tall figure in a dark blazer approached. It was Mr. Alvarez, the head administrator from the hospital. His voice carried. Didn't expect to see you here, he said, extending his hand. This woman, this nurse saved your father's life. Twice. The entire crowd paused. Glasses lowered. Ivy turned, confused. She was the one who pushed through the emergency protocol. Off shift. No extra pay. Just heart. I felt all the oxygen return to the space I was standing in. If you've ever been pushed aside in your own family while carrying them in silence, drop a comment, or just let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if you've ever been invisible until someone else spoke your truth out loud. The hush thickened. Even Ivy's laughter stopped. My name floated through the air, real, solid, and for the first time that night, every eye turned toward me. I didn't know what to do with the attention. People were staring, murmuring. their eyes darting between Mr. Alvarez and me like they were trying to reassign me a place in the story they had already written. In their version, I was the invisible older sister, the quiet one, the practical one, the one who lived far away and showed up late. I wasn't meant to be in the spotlight. Ivy was the star. Ivy, with her Instagram-perfect curls and spontaneous tears, her sparkling dress and the Audi she hadn't even test-driven. Now Mr. Alvarez had torn that script in half. I had no idea. Someone whispered behind me. Another person touched my arm gently and said, "That's incredible. Thank you." I gave a weak smile and stepped back. I didn't come here to be seen. I came to drop off a gift and leave quietly. But now Ivy was walking toward me, confusion furrowing her perfect brows. She stopped a few feet away. "Wait, you're that nurse?" I nodded. "I'm your sister." "I know that." She snapped. "I meant the nurse from the hospital. That Mr. Alvarez just praised. Same person." I said, my voice soft but steady. "I was there the night Dad collapsed." She blinked, like she was trying to line up the two versions of me, sister and savior, and couldn't make the pieces fit. Then, like a switch flipping, she smiled again and turned back to her friends. "Isn't she amazing?" she said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders too tightly. "She's always been so responsible." It was the kind of compliment that didn't feel like one, the kind that translated to "she's useful, but she's not us." I peeled her arm off gently. "I'm gonna head out," I said. "What, you just got here? The cake's about to come out." I glanced around. Waiters were lighting sparklers on a 6-tiered tower frosted in pink and gold. The DJ was revving up the music again, and in the middle of it all stood my father, lifting a glass with Ivy's name etched on it. "You don't have to stay," Ivy said, her voice sugar-sweet. "But don't feel weird. Okay, I mean, not everyone needs to be the center of attention." She meant it kindly, I think. But my throat tightened. I stepped past her, heading for the gate. No one stopped me. I walked back to my car, carefully stepping over the gravel again, and sat inside with my hands still on the wheel for a full 5 minutes before starting the engine. The silence was loud. I could still hear the echoes of laughter and music behind me. On the dashboard sat a plain white envelope, addressed to me in familiar handwriting. I had found it on my apartment floor that morning, slipped under the door sometime after midnight. It was from Dad. Inside was a bill. $314.67, hospital balance due. No note, no explanation, just a sticky note. "Can you cover this one last thing?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles going pale. This one last thing. As if I hadn't already paid for 3 ambulance rides. As if I hadn't fought with insurance agents on my only day off. As if I hadn't driven 6 hours to pick him up from rehab after his last fall because Ivy had a school trip and Diane said her back was acting up. And now he raised a glass for her, called her his light, his reason to keep living. No mention of me. When I got back to my apartment, the hallway lights flickered, casting dull yellow patterns on the floor. My neighbor's cat watched me through the cracked door like I was some weary ghost returning from the underworld. Inside, the space was neat, sparse, the kind of apartment that looked temporary even though I'd lived there for 4 years. A hand-me-down couch, a coffee table I'd assembled myself, photos only on the fridge, never on the wall because I kept thinking I'd leave soon. I dropped the gift box on the table, still unopened, and sat in the dark. My phone buzzed. A text from Ivy. "Thanks for coming. Dad was really happy you showed up." I think he was surprised. I didn't respond. Another buzz. This time, a text from Aunt Diane. "Hope tonight wasn't awkward. You looked tired. Maybe rest more." Then silence again. I opened the fridge, took out a bottle of iced tea, and stood in the kitchen drinking it straight from the bottle. I thought of Mom. She would have known what to say. She would have known how to hold both Ivy and me in the same room and make us feel whole, not compared. But she died when I was 15. I learned to fill the silence she left behind by doing laundry, groceries, appointments, late-night runs to 7-Eleven when Ivy cried over boys. Dad never recovered. Not emotionally. He became distant. Ivy got the bedtime stories. I got the receipts. Ivy got kisses on the forehead. I got the checklists, pick up medication, reschedule the cardiologist, talk to the pharmacist. When I left for nursing school, I didn't tell anyone I got a scholarship. I just left. And I paid every cent not covered by aid working double shifts in trauma. It wasn't about pride. It was about survival. Now here I was, footing another hospital bill. This one last thing. The tea tasted bitter. I walked to the tiny bedroom and sat at the edge of the bed, looking at the single photo frame on the nightstand. It was one of the only pictures of Mom and me. She had her arms around both of us girls. Ivy was maybe 4. I was 10, holding a small cake with lopsided candles. We both wore hand-sewn dresses. Mom's eyes were smiling. I whispered to the frame, "Do you think I did okay?" The silence in the room didn't answer, but somewhere in the middle of the silence, I felt my chest unclench. Not all the way, just enough to breathe. The next morning, I woke early and dressed for my shift. The hospital was quieter on Sundays, but emergencies didn't take days off. I tied my hair back, packed a granola bar, and slipped the hospital bill into my bag. I'd call billing during lunch. As I walked to the bus stop, the city was just beginning to stir. Street sweepers moved slowly. Birds called out from half-empty trees. The world didn't care what Ivy got for her birthday. The world just kept going. At the station, a man in scrubs nodded at me. "Long night." "Not yet," I said, but getting there. He smiled. "A tired one. See you in the trenches." The bus doors opened. I stepped on, and behind me, the sun finally started rising. The smell of antiseptic hit me the second I walked into the ER. Bleach, sweat, coffee. Always the same, like a signature scent of survival. I clocked in at 6:58 a.m. and found my name on the board, room 3, bed 2. 1 trauma, 1 post-op, and a transfer to cardiology pending. "Ellie," said Maria at the nurse's station, glancing up from a clipboard. "You're on the Jameson, kid. Car accident. Parents are losing it. Got it." I slipped on my gloves, tied my scrub top tighter, and pushed through the curtain. The boy on the bed couldn't have been older than 11. Blood crusted along his hairline, and his left arm was bent at a painful angle. But he was awake, brave, eyes flicking everywhere but his own injuries. I knelt down beside him and smiled. "Hey there, I'm Ellie. You like stickers?" He nodded cautiously. "Great," I said, "because I've got dinosaurs, and they're only for warriors." It was automatic. This version of me, calm, focused, capable. I knew how to explain fractures without causing panic, how to get a parent to breathe when the room felt like it was closing in. At work, I didn't feel like the forgotten older daughter. I felt solid, necessary. By noon, I'd stabilized the kid, consoled his mother, assisted in 2 minor procedures, and drained a hemovac on a patient who reminded me of Dad. Same wiry arms, same way of saying thank you like it cost them something. I ducked into the staff lounge and finally made the call to billing. "Yes, this is Ellie Tran. I'm calling about patient Roger Tran's outstanding charges. I have the account number, hold on." I read off the digits from the crumpled envelope. "Yes." The woman on the other end said, "Typing." That balance includes a 2-night stay in CCU, medications, imaging, and a transport fee. Do you intend to pay the full amount today? Can I split it over 3 months? Certainly. We can process the first third now. I gave her my card number, stomach tightening as I mentally calculated how much overtime I'd need to cover it. When I hung up, I stared at the floor for a long time. 3 weeks ago, Dad had told me over the phone that he didn't want Ivy to worry about any of the medical stuff. Said she was too young. Said she had enough on her plate with school and cheer. He didn't know I was outside the pharmacy picking up his prescription when he said it. I thought of that moment now as I finished the shift. Every footstep felt heavier, but I didn't complain. I never did. By the time I got home, the sky had darkened again. My apartment was quiet, but not peaceful, the kind of silence that pressed in from the corners. I peeled off my scrubs, microwaved a leftover soup, and sat at the table with my laptop. My inbox had 4 unread messages, 2 from Ivy, 1 from Dad, 1 from Aunt Diane. I opened Dad's first. Ellie, thanks for handling the bill. I didn't want to ask Ivy. You understand. Right. Anyway, she had a great birthday. Hope you saw the pictures. Dad. No apology, no acknowledgement of what I'd done, just a passive assumption that I'd keep carrying the weight, silently and invisibly. I opened Ivy's emails next. The first was a forward photos from the party, her twirling in her new car, Dad lifting a cupcake to her mouth, Diane clapping with wine in hand. I wasn't in any of them. The second was just one line. Hope you're not mad. You didn't say goodbye. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a blank document and started typing a message I didn't plan to send. Dear Ivy, I'm not mad. I'm tired. I'm tired of being the one who shows up in the dark while you shine in the light. I'm tired of being the one who drives 6 hours to pick Dad up while you post pictures of lattes and study breaks. I'm tired of being asked to carry it all and then being told I'm lucky just to be included. You got a car, I got a bill, and I'm not jealous. I'm just worn out. I love you, but I also miss me. Ellie. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it. Sometimes truth isn't about saying things out loud. It's about letting yourself finally admit it, at least to yourself. The next day, I declined an overtime shift. I packed a sandwich, grabbed a book I hadn't finished in 6 months, and took the bus to the lake. I sat on a bench, watching the ducks skim across the water, and felt like I was remembering how to breathe. My phone rang. Ivy again. This time, I answered. Hey. I said. Hey, she chirped. You busy? Not really. There was a pause. Then, I was just thinking. I never said thank you. Not properly. For what? For Dad. For everything. I guess. Aunt Diane said you were the reason he got through it. I didn't say anything. I didn't know about the bill. She added quickly. He never told me. I swear. He didn't want you to know. I said. He wanted to protect you. She hesitated. That's not fair. No, I said, gently. But it's what happened. Another silence stretched. I think I've been oblivious, she admitted. I thought you liked being the strong one. I don't like it, I said. I just learned how to survive it. I'm sorry, she whispered. The words didn't fix anything, but they didn't hurt either. I'm trying, she said, to be better. I know, I replied. She didn't ask for anything else. She didn't fill the silence with apologies or excuses. She just sat there on the other end of the line. We hung up quietly. Later that evening, I opened the small wrapped box I'd meant to give Ivy, the poetry book. I held it for a moment, then slid it into an envelope and addressed it to her dorm. Inside, I added a note. Happy birthday. This book helped me when I felt unseen. Maybe it'll help you see more too. Then I lit a candle, opened my window, and let the cool air wash through the room. It wasn't resolution, it wasn't healing, but it was a beginning. A week passed, then 2. And I didn't hear from Dad. Not a call, not a text, nothing after the message thanking me for paying the bill. It wasn't that I expected a parade, or even a proper apology. I'd long since given up on that kind of closure, but part of me kept checking my phone like maybe, just maybe, he'd ask how I was. Instead, Aunt Diane called. "Ellie, sweetheart," she said, her tone too cheerful to be innocent. "We're doing a little family brunch this Sunday. Just something casual. Ivy's bringing her new car to show the cousins." I stared at my calendar. Sunday was my only day off. "Dad's coming," I asked. "Of course he's excited." "Oh, and wear something nice. We'll take some family photos by the hydrangeas." I hesitated. "Is this about the party?" There was a pause. "Oh, honey, you're not still upset about that, are you?" We were all just a little overwhelmed. Ivy's birthday was a huge deal, and honestly, you know how your dad is. He doesn't always show his feelings, but he is grateful. He just forgets to say it sometimes. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But her voice was that brand of sugar-coated reassurance I'd grown up learning to decode. It meant come for the pictures, smile in the background, and don't make it awkward. "I'll think about it," I said. "Well, let me know soon. We need a head count for the caterer." After we hung up, I stood in the middle of my apartment for a while, staring at nothing. The silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like waiting. Like something unspoken hanging just above my head. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment at the party when Mr. Alvarez spoke my name, how the whole world seemed to freeze, and how quickly it all went back to normal once I stepped away. I thought of Mom again. She used to say, "Love isn't loud. It's what's done when no one claps." But sometimes you just want someone to clap anyway. Just once. Just for you. I didn't go to the brunch. Instead, I took a walk. It was a warm day, and the sidewalks were busy with strollers and couples and dogs who clearly ruled their households. I walked past the old corner bookstore, the kind that smelled like paper and dust and rain-soaked stories. I hadn't been inside in years. On a whim, I pushed the door open. The little bell jingled. The same woman who used to run the register was still there, gray hair in a long braid, reading glasses perched on her nose. She glanced up and smiled warmly. "Long time," she said. I smiled back. Thought I'd stop in. "I used to come here after school." "I remember," she said, pointing at me with her pen. "You were always in the poetry section." She returned to her crossword, and I wandered past the shelves, fingers trailing along spines like they were old friends. Eventually, I picked out a slim volume new, but the title caught me. Things Left Unsaid. I sat in the reading nook at the back, tucked under a dusty lamp, and read page after page until the words blurred. Around page 30, I cried. Not loudly. Not the kind of crying that racks the body. Just the kind that sneaks out quietly. A few tears. Like my heart needed to leak a little just to keep working. I bought the book. As I stepped out into the afternoon light, my phone buzzed. A message from Ivy. "Are you okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, "Yeah, just needed some air." Another message popped up. "Everyone asked about you today. Dad too." He didn't say much, but he looked off, quiet, like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out how. I read the words again. Then I texted, "I believe that." She replied with a heart. It felt strange. We'd never been that kind of sister. Not growing up. But maybe something was changing. Later that evening, I got another message. This time, from Dad. Ellie, can I come see you? I stared at it, heart thumping. I typed back. When his reply was instant, tonight I looked around. The apartment was a mess. Dishes in the sink, books everywhere. But I didn't care. Come. He arrived 30 minutes later. I buzzed him up. And when he knocked, I opened the door before he could even raise his hand again. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, he was still tall. Still carried himself with that quiet command, but emotionally, he seemed deflated, like the air had gone out of something inside him. Hi, I said. Hi, kiddo. He stepped inside and looked around. You keep it neat. I shrugged. I try. We sat on the couch. The air between us was stiff, like two people waiting for the other to crack first. I saw the bill went through. He said finally, Yeah, thank you. You already said that. He nodded slowly. I did. I guess I just thought it didn't count if I didn't say it in person. There was a long pause. I shouldn't have sent it to you like that, he said, looking down. I panicked. I was embarrassed. You know, I didn't plan to get sick. I didn't plan to need. I swallowed hard. I didn't plan to be the one who always gives. He nodded. Ivy didn't know. I added. You made sure she didn't. She's younger, he said. She wouldn't know how to handle. And you didn't think I was too young when I was picking up Mom's prescriptions, when I had to learn to use the oxygen machine at 16, when you cried into my shoulder in the middle of the night and I pretended I was asleep, so you wouldn't be ashamed. His face crumpled. I never wanted this for you, he said. I just didn't know how to stop needing you. I sat very still. My hands were cold. You saw me as strong. I said. So you let me carry everything. Yes, he whispered. And I'm sorry. I nodded. It wasn't a fix, but it was real. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. It's not much, but it's a start. I've been working with a counselor. They helped me set up a budget, and I'm applying for Medicaid. I took the envelope. Inside was a check, small, but meaningful. I can't pay it all back, he said, but I can stop assuming you'll always cover it. I looked at him, really looked. He was trying. Not perfectly, not even well, but honestly, thanks for coming. I said, I wanted to come sooner, he admitted, but I didn't know how to walk into a room where you might not forgive me. I smiled faintly. You don't have to be perfect. Just present. He nodded. I can do that. We sat in silence for a while. Then he reached for the poetry book on my table. You still read these? Yeah. Keeps me grounded. He flipped through it, then pointed at a line. There are 2 ways to go missing. One is to leave. The other is to never be seen. He read it twice. Then he looked at me. I think I finally see you. Ellie. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. A few days later, I came home to find a box on my doorstep. No label, no delivery slip. Just a small cardboard box wrapped in plain brown paper, with my name scrawled across the top in familiar handwriting. Ivy's. I took it inside and opened it slowly, carefully unwrapping each layer until I got to the contents. Inside was a white ceramic mug that read, Best Big Sister in gold cursive, slightly chipped on one side. Beneath it, tucked between some pink tissue paper, was a folded note card in Ivy's glitter pen. Ellie, I saw this at a thrift shop and thought of you. The chip reminded me of us. Not perfect. Still standing. Still warm. I know we don't talk much, and I know I've acted like the world revolves around me, but I wanted you to have something that felt a little more yours. I miss you. Love. Ivy. I read the card twice, then set it down on my kitchen table and stared at the mug. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't elegant, but something about it cracked open a space in me I didn't know had been closed. The next morning, I texted her, "Thanks for the mug. You're right, we're a little chipped, but still standing." She sent back a heart emoji and a photo of her messy dorm desk with the caption, "Trying to write a paper. Miss you too." That weekend, I didn't take any extra shifts. I cleaned my apartment properly for the first time in weeks. I dusted the photo frame on my nightstand, lit a candle Mom used to love lavender and bergamot, and made tea in my new mug. When I sat down with it, hands wrapped around the warmth, I thought of all the times I'd made tea for other people, for Dad after his surgery, for Ivy after a breakup, for patients too anxious to sleep. It felt strange and good to sit with something that was just for me. And then the letter came. A thick envelope with a university crest in the corner and my full name printed across the front in serif type. I opened it cautiously. Inside, "Dear Ms. Ellie Tran, we are pleased to inform you that your application for the Clinical Nurse Educator Fellowship has been accepted." I stopped reading. The room spun slightly. This was the position I'd applied for months ago, and then forgotten about. A competitive fellowship for nurses who wanted to transition into teaching and policy with a housing stipend, travel support, and a chance to publish clinical studies. It was across the country. It would mean leaving the ER, leaving the city, leaving Dad. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty at the thought. I called Maria first. "You serious?" she shouted in my ear. "Ellie. Oh my God, that's huge. I haven't told anyone else yet." "Tell everyone," she said. "You have to take it." "When would you start?" "3 months. That's enough time to train a replacement, and I'll throw you the biggest goodbye brunch this hospital has ever seen." I laughed. I hadn't realized how good it would feel to be celebrated without condition. No hidden agendas, no family strings, just joy. When I called Dad, his voice cracked halfway through the conversation. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Really more than you know. And I want you to go." "You sure I'll be okay?" he said. "I mean, I won't lie, I'll miss you, but this is your time." I felt a lump rise in my throat. I wanted to believe him. I chose to. Later that week, Ivy called me out of the blue. "Are you seriously moving? Looks like it. You're gonna be, like, famous nurse professor lady." I laughed. "Not quite. But it's a step." She was quiet for a moment. "Can I visit?" "Of course. Even if I bring stupid questions and cry over my grades." Especially then, we talked for an hour. About things we'd never said before. About Mom. About what it meant to grow up with grief in different ways. She told me she used to envy how unshakable I was. I told her that being unshakable usually meant I was just really good at pretending I didn't feel anything. We both cried. Softly. Sincerely. The day I gave my official notice at the hospital, I walked out feeling light. No guilt. No second thoughts. But that night, as I packed the first box in my apartment, a stack of poetry books, a worn stethoscope, and that chipped mug, I sat cross-legged on the floor and let the memories pass through me. The day Mom died, the night Dad called me from the ER, the party, the ice sculpture, the envelope with the bill. I let it all come up. Then I took a deep breath, taped the box shut, and labeled it, "Things that built me." The last month moved quickly. Dad started physical therapy again. He sent me updates after every session, 20 minutes on the bike today, or PT says I'm walking better. I could hear the pride in his texts, the self-respect, slowly returning. Ivy sent me a playlist she made called Ellie's Escape. It was full of soft folk songs and moody piano covers of pop hits. She even recorded a short voice memo and slipped it into the last track. For the sister who saved everyone and finally chose herself. Keep going. The day I moved, they both showed up. Dad carried boxes. Ivy took selfies. Aunt Diane stayed home, which felt like a small mercy. Before I closed the door for the last time, I looked around at the little apartment that had held so much of me, my tears, my silence, my exhaustion, and my quiet triumphs. Then I walked out. The plane ride was quiet. No crying babies, no turbulence, just me and a window seat. I watched the city fall away beneath the clouds, and I didn't look back. The city where I landed was colder, not just in temperature, though the wind cut sharp through my coat as I stepped outside the airport, but in tone, rhythm, silence. Everything felt new and unfamiliar. Strangers moved with the kind of detachment you only find in cities where ambition outpaces community, and for the first time in years, no one here knew my name, my family, or my past. I checked into a modest apartment near the university's teaching hospital, a compact studio with a balcony just wide enough to hold a folding chair and a single potted plant. The furniture came furnished. The walls were bare. The silence was mine. Orientation week passed in a blur. PowerPoints, faculty introductions, emails about ID badges and access codes. The other fellows came from all over, two from New York, one from New Delhi, another from rural Minnesota. Everyone had a story. Some were loud about theirs. I wasn't. I kept my voice quiet during the group introductions. Ellie Tran, ER nurse for 6 years, focused on trauma care, interested in clinical education and health access. That was all I said. But the program director nodded with recognition. Tran, you're the nurse who developed that postcode family protocol. Right. I blinked. You read that we did. That's why we wanted you. I said thank you, quietly. But inside, something shifted. Someone had seen my work, not my sacrifices, not my role as caretaker, just my mind, my skill. I walked home that night beneath a sky scraped clean by wind, and for the first time since arriving, I felt the kind of calm that doesn't ask you to explain yourself, just to exist. But freedom has its own kind of weight. Late at night, I still checked my phone for messages. I still replayed conversations from the past year. The guilt didn't vanish. It just moved to quieter corners. One Saturday, after a long seminar, I called Dad. He answered on the second ring. Kiddo, he said, voice brighter than I expected. How's the big city treating you? Not bad. Cold. But I like it. You eating enough? I smiled. Trying. Good. I've been making your chicken soup recipe. Ivy says it tastes like you. She's there. Comes by every other Sunday. Brings that playlist she made. Sometimes just sits with me. You'd be surprised how much she's grown. I was quiet for a moment. I'm glad. He cleared his throat. Ellie, about the hospital stuff, the money, all of it. I waited. I think for a long time. I saw you as a solution instead of a daughter. I'm sorry for that. It landed softly, not like a blow, but like a truth finally laid down, a stone removed from the chest. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. Later that evening, Ivy texted me a blurry photo of their Sunday dinner dad at the table, steam rising from a bowl, and in the center, the chipped best big sister mug, filled with tea. We keep it here now, she wrote. It makes us feel like you're still at the table. I didn't cry, but I read the message 5 times. Midway through the semester, my mentor, Dr. Leland, called me into her office. She was an older woman, sharp-eyed and blunt, with a voice like worn gravel and a wardrobe of all black. I liked her immediately. You've been quiet, she said, gesturing for me to sit, but not absent. That's rare. I gave a small nod. Your paper on post-trauma family immersion, I want to submit it to the National Journal. It's clear, grounded, compassionate. You write like someone who's lived through it. I said. She studied me. You remind me of myself at your age, except I ran from my family. You seem to have carried yours. Both hurt, I said. She smiled. Smart girl. That night, I walked home slowly. The streets were slick from recent rain. A man played cello on the corner, and the music echoed against the buildings in a way that made the whole block feel like a cathedral. I stopped and listened. I wasn't sad. I wasn't healed. I was just present, which, for me, was everything. Winter settled in. I bought a thicker coat. I learned the quiet joy of radiant heat from old radiators. I started keeping a journal again. Nothing philosophical, just snapshots of moments I didn't want to forget. Tuesday saw a patient's father cry when he was told his daughter could go home. Friday, ate lunch alone and didn't feel lonely. Sunday, Dad sent me a photo of the backyard snow. Ivy built a crooked snowman with Mom's old scarf. I started building a new version of myself in this city, not a replacement, but an addition. Nurse, sister, daughter, teacher, person. And still, some nights, I'd dream of the party, the pink banner, the ice sculpture, the way no one looked at me until someone else said my name. But when I woke, the feeling didn't cling. It drifted, like morning fog. One morning, I opened an email from Dr. Leland. Ellie. Your paper's been accepted for publication. You'll be speaking at the regional conference next month. Get ready to be seen. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't forward it to Ivy or Dad. Not yet. I let it sit with me. Being seen felt different now. Less like a performance. More like a quiet invitation. On the day of the conference, I stood in front of a room full of healthcare professionals, surgeons, nurses, administrators, policymakers. I wore the navy blazer Ivy had helped me pick out online. When I finished my presentation, the applause was soft but steady. A few people stood. Some came up after, asking for copies, ideas, connections. One woman said, "That was the most human thing I've heard all year." I smiled and thanked her. Afterward, I stepped outside into the hotel courtyard. The sky was gray, but the air was gentle. My phone buzzed, a video message from Ivy. I opened it. She was sitting on the living room couch, holding the chipped mug in both hands. "Hey, Professor Tran," she said, grinning. "Dad and I just watched your talk. We streamed it on the big TV like it was the Super Bowl." Dad waved in the background. "You crushed it." Kiddo Ivy leaned in, her voice softening. "Just wanted to say, I'm proud to be your sister. I see you now." The screen went dark, and I stood there, holding the phone, heart quiet. They had said it, out loud, in their own time, and I hadn't had to fight for it. I hadn't had to prove anything. I had just lived. And finally, they had looked. Sometimes that's all you need. Not a car, not a party, just someone, somewhere, saying your name with eyes that really mean it. Spring arrived in the new city slowly. It started with the melting of snowbanks into thin rivers along the sidewalk and the hesitant budding of trees, as if the world was still unsure whether it was safe to soften. I felt that way too. On the first warm Sunday, I found a quiet cafe 3 blocks from my apartment. It was small, tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat, with mismatched furniture and soft jazz playing through dusty speakers. I brought a book not medical, not academic, just poetry, and sat outside under the weak sun. Halfway through the second cup of coffee, My phone rang. I almost didn't pick up when I saw the name. Aunt Diane. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. My instinct said to let it ring, let silence answer silence, but something in me shifted. I pressed accept. Hi, Auntie. Ellie, she said, her voice neutral but stretched thin. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I wasn't sure either. She laughed once, dryly. Well, I suppose I deserve that. I didn't argue. I heard about your fellowship, she said. Your father mentioned it in the family group chat. He seemed different, proud, maybe. He's been working on himself, I said. It shows. She paused. So have you. I mean, working on yourself? We see it. I blinked. We see it. That's good to hear. I wanted to say something. About before. Here it came. I wasn't fair to you, she said. Not at the party. Not when your mom passed. Not ever. Really. I always thought you were just fine, capable, like you didn't need anything from any of us. So I focused on Ivy, because she made her needs obvious. She cried. You didn't. I stared at the cracks in the cafe table. Just because I didn't cry in front of you, I said gently, doesn't mean I didn't cry. I know that now, she whispered. A long silence stretched between us, but for once, it didn't feel like a wall. Just a pause. Thank you for saying something, I said, even if it took time. She exhaled. I hope, when you come back to visit, you'll stop by. I might, I said, and I meant it. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, letting the sun warm my face. I felt intact, not invincible, not glowing, just quietly. Okay. It was more than I'd had in years. Back at the fellowship, Dr. Leland asked me to mentor a new nurse intern, a young woman named Cassie, fresh out of school, wide-eyed and nervous. On her first day, she dropped her clipboard, tripped over her own laces, and apologized 7 times in 15 minutes. Deep breath, I told her, helping her up. We all start somewhere. Trust me. She looked at me, panicked. Have you ever messed up? I smiled. Once. I gave a man's daughter the wrong room number and she walked in on another family's end-of-life goodbye. I cried in the supply closet for 20 minutes afterward. Cassie stared, then laughed. You're not joking. Nope. That seemed to calm her. I didn't expect how much I'd enjoy teaching. Not just the technical stuff, how to insert an IV, how to read vitals, how to de-escalate a frantic family member, but the human part. How to hold grief without absorbing it. How to see people without being devoured by their pain. How to stay human in a system that demands machines. Cassie stayed late after shifts, asked too many questions, reminded me of Ivy in a way that made me tender. One day, she said, you don't talk much about your own life. I shrugged. It's quieter when I listen. She grinned. Well, I hope you're writing a book or something. The way you talk, it matters. That night, I opened a new document on my laptop, title The Quiet Ones. I didn't know what it would be yet. Essays, stories, fragments of memory, but it felt like time, not for validation, not for anyone else, just to give shape to what had been unnamed for so long. Weeks passed. The trees grew bold again. I started biking to work, wind in my face, hair tied back in a loose braid. I wore sneakers instead of flats. I stopped saying sorry when people bumped into me on the train. I stopped disappearing. On a Friday afternoon, I received a padded envelope in the mail. It was from Ivy. Inside was a photo album, handmade, black pages with gold ink. The first page held a title, You Were Always There. Photo 1 me at 16, holding Ivy's hand on the front steps of our old house after Mom's funeral. I didn't know this picture existed. Photo 2, Me in scrubs, asleep in a hospital chair. Ivy tucked beside me in a hoodie, clearly taken by someone trying not to wake us. Photo 3. My birthday, 5 years ago. A cake I barely remembered. Me laughing, a blurry dad behind me. Each photo had a caption in Ivy's handwriting. You held everything together. I thought you were distant, but you were just exhausted. You taught me how to love by never leaving. I ran my fingers along the pages, heart thudding. On the last page, she had taped a Polaroid, a close-up of the chipped mug. Underneath, she'd written, "I'll never throw this away, even if it breaks completely." I didn't cry. I just sat there, hand over my heart, and let it expand. I texted her. I got it. Thank you. Come visit when the semester ends. Let's be sisters now, not just survivors. She replied instantly, "Deal." Later that week, I spoke to Dad. He'd started gardening again. Said the dirt helped him stay present. Sent me photos of crooked tomato vines and tiny yellow blossoms. He'd also joined a local grief group. Shared a story, he said, about being the parent who forgot to say thank you. He told me the other members cried. "You really said that I asked?" "Yeah," he said. "I figured if you had the courage to live through it, I could at least talk about it." We stayed on the phone for an hour. It felt normal. Not stiff, not loaded. Just two people who'd finally found their way back to one another. By summer, the city had fully unfurled. Trees bloomed pink and white. The lake shimmered. My apartment windows stayed open, and I began to plan my first trip back home. Not out of duty, not out of guilt, just because I wanted to. A homecoming, not a rescue. I would bring wine, maybe a new book for Ivy, a small potted plant for Dad's garden. I didn't expect a party. I didn't need applause, just a seat at the table, one with my name on it even if it was written in pencil. I looked around my apartment one night, boxes half packed for the short visit, the chipped mug clean on the dish rack, and I smiled. This wasn't a perfect ending, but it was mine. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the bill, the burden, or the background. I was the sister who stayed. And now, I was also the sister who left, but not to disappear. To become. The day I flew home, the sky was bright and cloudless, the kind of impossible blue that made everything beneath it feel newly washed. I packed light, just a carry-on and a satchel filled with small gifts. A paperback novel for Ivy. A lavender plant in a ceramic pot for Dad. A photo I had printed of the three of us, captured during a blurry video call where we had all laughed at something no one could now remember. As the plane descended, I found myself scanning the familiar landscape like a returning stranger. The suburbs, the beige rooftops, the curving lines of the highway, all of it was the same. But I wasn't. Ivy picked me up from the airport. She pulled up in the silver Audi, which looked sleeker than I remembered, and leaned across to open the passenger door before I reached it. "Welcome back, city girl." She grinned, oversized sunglasses perched on her head. I slid into the seat, suddenly aware of how different I felt. Not because of the city or the fellowship, but because of how grounded I had become in the space between then and now. "You dyed your hair," I said, noticing the streak of honey blonde among her dark waves. "Just a phase," she said, shrugging, trying out the whole figuring myself out thing. "Your influence." We drove in silence for a few minutes, windows down, warm wind rushing in. A song played low on the speakers, one from the playlist she made me. I realized, soft piano, wistful vocals. "You nervous?" she asked at a red light. I shook my head. "Not really. It feels different this time." "Yeah," she said, glancing sideways. "It is different." Dad was waiting on the porch when we pulled in. He stood a little straighter than before, wore a crisp button-down shirt and jeans that looked new. His face lit up when he saw me. "Ellie," he said, stepping forward and pulling me into a hug that was warm and surprisingly long. "You look happy." "I am," I said. And I was. Inside. The house felt familiar but rearranged. The photos on the mantel had changed. New frames, new memories. One of Ivy at school, smiling beside a presentation board. One of Dad in the garden, kneeling beside a tomato plant. And one of me head turned slightly, speaking at the conference. It was a screenshot, grainy and pixelated. But there it was. My name printed on the slide behind me. "You put that up?" I asked. Dad looked sheepish. I might have printed 10 copies first, wanted the size to be just right. I laughed. Dinner was simple roast chicken, salad, bread from the bakery down the road. We sat around the table like something sacred had quietly returned. After dessert, Dad disappeared into the garage. When he came back, he was holding a dusty box. "I found this while cleaning," he said. "Figured it should be yours now." I opened it slowly. Inside were old letters, school certificates, a crumpled drawing from Ivy that said, "My sis is a hero" in uneven crayon. At the bottom was a postcard Mom had written once, dated just a few weeks before she died. It read, "Ellie, I know you carry more than most, that you hear what's unspoken and give more than you're given. One day, I hope someone sees that. Love always. Mom." My throat closed. I pressed the card to my chest. "I didn't know you had this," I whispered. Dad sat beside me. I didn't know what it was until recently. I think I was scared to open that box. It felt like it might break me. It didn't. I said, "No." He said, "It didn't." Ivy leaned over, resting her chin on my shoulder. "She saw you," she said softly, even before the rest of us did. Later that night, I stood alone in the backyard, looking at the garden. It was small, but a live rows of basil, tomatoes, some wild lavender peeking up between the cracks in the stones. The moon was high. The house was quiet. But inside me, there was a noise, a soft humming, the sound of life realigning. I thought about everything that had led here, the birthday party, the bill, the silence, the reckoning. And now this, an evening with my family, not as their caretaker, not as their solution, but as someone who finally belonged in her own story. The next morning, Ivy and I walked to the coffee shop where we used to go as kids. The place hadn't changed. Still smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon. We sat at the corner booth. "I used to be so mad at you," she said, stirring her drink. I looked up. "I know. Not because you were cold, but because you weren't. You were too strong." It made me feel like I wasn't allowed to fall apart. I nodded, absorbing her words. "But now," she said, "I realize I just didn't understand what strength looked like when it wasn't loud. I didn't either," I admitted. "I thought being strong meant being invisible. But it doesn't." "No," she said. "It doesn't." She reached across the table and touched my hand. We didn't speak for a while. Before I left that evening, Dad handed me an envelope. "No bills this time," he said with a half smile. Inside was a short letter, typed neatly. "Dear Ellie, I'm applying for a part-time volunteer program at the hospital. I want to give back. I've already started helping in the garden for the community center. I've been practicing saying 'I'm proud of you' out loud. It still feels too small for what I mean, but I am. Come home when you want to, not because you have to. Love." Dad, I hugged him tightly. On the ride back to the airport, Ivy played a song I hadn't heard before. It was quiet, full of strings and slow lyrics. She didn't say anything, just drove. At the terminal. She pulled over and looked at me. You coming back for the holidays, maybe? I said. Or maybe I'll host this time. She raised her eyebrows. Wow. Ellie in charge of the party. That's new. Very new. I smiled. I'll send you a bill for it. We both laughed. Then she reached over and hugged me. I'm proud of you too, she said into my ear, and I won't stop saying it. The flight was peaceful. I watched the land pull away again and felt no panic, no loss, just space. Space for all that was and all that could be. When I returned to my apartment, it felt less like a rental and more like a home. The chipped mug sat waiting on the shelf. I made tea, opened my journal, and wrote. I used to think being strong meant carrying others. Now I think it means letting them meet you halfway. I didn't need to be the hero anymore. Just human. Just here. I returned to the fellowship as the summer light stretched long into the evenings, touching the edges of the city with gold. Everything felt warmer, softer. Even the hospital halls, usually buzzing with urgency, seemed calmer, as if I had finally learned how to walk through them without losing parts of myself. Cassie met me at the door on my first morning back. You look different, she said. Not as a compliment, but an observation. I feel different, I replied. Good different. I nodded. Yeah. Good. She grinned and handed me a clipboard. We've got 2 new interns shadowing today. You up for it? Let's do it. In the training room. I introduced myself the same way I always had. I'm Ellie Tran, trauma nurse turned educator. My job is to help you learn how to stay steady when the ground shifts under your feet. One of the interns raised her hand. What's the hardest part about working in medicine? I paused for a second, then said, not the blood, not the hours. It's remembering to take care of yourself as much as you take care of others. It's hard to pour water when your own cup is empty. They nodded. Cassie looked at me like she was seeing something new, and maybe she was. That night, I walked home slowly, passing the same bookstore I'd visited during that first cold week months ago. The same old woman was still at the counter, still scribbling in crosswords. Back again, she asked, squinting over her glasses. Always, I said, smiling. This time, I went to the poetry shelf and found a thin volume titled Letters to the Ones Who Stayed Quiet. I opened to a random page. The first line read, You do not have to be loud to be unforgettable. I bought it without a second thought. Back home. I sat on the balcony with tea in hand, lavender swaying beside me. I texted Ivy a photo of the book, and the quote, reminded me of you. She replied, but also of who you used to be, and who you are now, someone we can't forget. Even when you're quiet. That night, I stayed up writing. Not just journal entries, but real writing. A piece about caretaking, another about growing up in silence, one about how grief can wrap itself in gold bows and party lights. I didn't write to explain myself. I wrote to make room for what hadn't been said. And with every word, something in me loosened. The next day, Dr. Leland called me into her office. I submitted your essay to the symposium board, she said, not waiting for my reaction. They want you as a keynote speaker for the fall conference. My eyes widened. What, I wasn't expecting that? Well, start expecting more of yourself, she said. You're not just a good nurse. You're a thinker, a witness, a translator of experience. I sat down, overwhelmed. You've spent your life absorbing, she added. It's time to radiate. That evening, I called Dad. I hadn't told him about the writing yet. He answered on the first ring. Hey, kiddo. How's the concrete jungle? Less jungle. More garden. I smiled. Guess what, I'm going to be a keynote speaker this fall. He let out a low whistle. Look at you. I didn't expect it. I did, he said softly. I always knew you had something to say. I just didn't know how to listen back then. I didn't know how to speak it. I admitted. Well, he said, you're doing it now. Loud and clear. After we hung up, I sat with the silence again. But this time, it didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like space. The weekend came. I bought a frame for the postcard from Mom, the one I found in the old box. I hung it on the wall above my desk, where I could see it every time I sat down to write. Every time I forgot who I was. Every time I felt the pull to shrink again. It read, "One day. I hope someone sees that." And they had. Not just Ivy, not just Dad, not just the faculty who read my work, but me. I saw myself now, not as a role, not as a label. Just Ellie. A woman who once carried her family's weight without complaint. A woman who stood in the shadows so others could shine. A woman who handed over the last of her energy and never asked for a receipt. And finally, a woman who realized she was not a utility. She was a person. That fall, when I stood on stage in front of hundreds of healthcare professionals at the symposium, I wore a dark green blazer and flats that didn't blister. The lights were warm, the microphone clear. I began like this. My name is Ellie Tran. I used to think silence was strength, but I've learned that strength is telling the truth about who you are out loud and trusting that the world won't fall apart when you do. The room was still. I spoke for 20 minutes. I told stories. I didn't cry. I didn't break. When I finished, the applause was loud, not because I had performed, but because I had revealed. Afterward, a woman in her 60s came up to me with watery eyes. My daughter's a nurse, she said. I never realized how much I expected from her. Thank you. And I nodded, because that was all I needed. Later that night, Ivy FaceTimed me. Her screen showed her dorm, a bowl of cereal, a stack of textbooks. You crushed it, she said. You watched. Of course, she said, eyes shining. You're on the wall now. What? She turned the camera. Pinned above her desk was a printed photo of me speaking on stage, and next to it, the Best Big Sister mug, now repurposed as a pen holder. You've always been the blueprint, she said. I'm just trying to catch up. I laughed. You're doing fine. We stayed on the call, not talking much. Just there. In the end, that was all we'd wanted. To be there. For each other. For ourselves. As the year wound down, I got an email from the hospital where I used to work. Maria. Subject thought you'd want to know the intern you mentored. Cassie. She's training the new cohort now. She said you taught her what care actually means. Miss you like hell. Come visit. I smiled and replied with a photo of the lavender plant, now blooming wide on my balcony. Tell Cassie I said she's already better than I was. And maybe that was true. Because strength isn't hoarding knowledge, it's passing it on. It's letting others stand where you once struggled. One night in late October, I walked to the lake alone. The air was cool. Leaves fell slow. I sat on a bench and watched the water move. No noise. No audience. Just a quiet woman, holding a chipped mug of tea and a whole life she had built with invisible hands. Not perfect, not painless, but hers.